New York-based artist Kara Walker is best known for her candid investigation of race, gender, sexuality, and violence through silhouetted figures that have appeared in numerous exhibitions worldwide, says Walker's biography on her website. She's created countless pieces from 1994 up to present day, every one of them provoking visceral thoughts and emotions in her viewers. Holland Coder, art critic with the New York Times, writes, quote, Kara Walker explores drawing's narrative potential in a large figurative tableau that looks as if it were drawn in ink, but is actually made of silhouettes cut from black paper. This technique, popular for making quick, inexpensive portraits in the 19th century, is decisively updated in Miss Walker's hands as she fashions a surreal, raunchy, angry fantasia on the world of antebellum slavery. Looking like a cross between a children's book and a sexually explicit cartoon, this skillful, imaginative work will doubtless be showing up somewhere else soon. Co-chief art critic of the New York Times, Roberta Smith, describes Walker's work as, quote, bitingly sarcastic, but also extremely beautiful, especially in the different ways these small paintings pit the precise cutouts against dark atmospheric settings. Her images zigzag between the real and the metaphorical, but for all their grace, spirit, and humor, none of these images are simply pleasant to look at. How could they be? These disturbing and violent themes and the silhouette are paired in most of Walker's art. In an interview with Art21, Walker describes how the silhouette aids her messages of her work. Quote, a lot of my work has been about the unexpected, kind of wanting to be the heroine and yet wanting to kill the heroine at the same time. And that kind of dilemma, that push and pull, is the underlying turbulence that I bring to each of the pieces that I make. The silhouette lends itself to a void inside the subject, not being able to look at it indirectly. Keys to the Coop is one of these silhouettes, this time a linoleum block print. A young black girl stumbles after the now headless chicken, holding its neck in her hand as if she has bitten it off. In her other hand she holds the titular key. She appears to be chasing the chicken or possibly running away. Art curator Dan Cameron comments on her pose, quote, the figure's extreme slant forward heightens an archaizing sense of artificiality. He goes on to write about another work, quote, a 1995 five-part etching, The Means to an End, wherein each adjoining scene maintains a sharp degree of compositional autonomy from the next, enabling us to envision a less period-specific phase of Walker's work, one in which distinct eras and individual narratives might mingle across the spread of time. In a similar piece titled Endless Conundrum, An African Anonymous Adventuress, multiple scenes without a clear connection or narrative are displayed seemingly randomly around the void white background. David Wall from the Oxford Art Journal comments on the lack of landscape, quote, Endless Conundrum offers no center and no vanishing point. There's no landscape or narrative to follow, but merely a series of visual ejaculations that erupt from the focal plane and shuttle between it and the cultural and social registers. This lack of location, however, is easily overcome. These figures are deeply and all too comfortably familiar. We do not need anything to tell us where this is because we know what this is. The image insistently demands that we chart the blank spaces, fill in the gaps, and complete the mapping for ourselves. That we are able to do this easily reveals our deep and continuing investment in the currency of the colonial narrative. The image does not exist without our narrativizing impulse. The Kataslav Caravan is a steam calliope contained inside of a cart decorated in silhouettes. It's a beautiful piece that branches out the media of her work, but why the calliope? In an interview with Art21, Walker explains that the piece was inspired by the lack of memorials centering the institution of slavery in America. She describes her experience first hearing a steam calliope playing from the riverboat Natchez in Algiers Point, New Orleans. Quote, it was kind of happy songs. When I heard it, I couldn't quite place the tunes, but I think they were kind of like old-timey good songs. They have a code in them that always makes people feel a certain way, like a password for something else. And that kind of wistfulness that some white Southerners would regard slavery or those bygone days. It's a wistfulness not just for the control or the power, but for the intimacy of what those enslaved people's bodies meant to theirs, mind, body, soul, and something like that, that is so unsavory that you can't even quite speak of it. That's what those songs do for me, in a way. American jazz pianist Jason Moran partnered with Walker playing the calliope at the exhibition. He also comments in the interview, quote, "I never forget what that sound makes the body feel, because it's unsettling even though it's trying to play the most settling music. The calliope sounds like someone whistling. Someone whistles this in a way because that's also the way music is used for people who are captive. That's summoning, that's sending out a signal, whether it's a distress signal or signal to come, like, let's celebrate together." The art of Kara Walker is complex and nuanced. It makes us feel uncomfortable and often upset. However, it also intrigues us, people of all races, ethnicities, and genders. There is a power in art that can make its viewers feel sick and still make them come back for more. Walker comments on these complexities in an interview with the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. Quote, "I guess all of the pieces are sort of disparate narratives or scenes or interactions that are maybe drawn on 19th century stereotypes of black characters, pickaninnies or whatever, and then characters that are loosely designed around that, but then are clearly my own identity, my own hand, or another sort of trope, but they all have been reduced to this one thing, this black paper. My thinking is, if a person like me can find themselves making pickaninny Negro minstrel art, meaning for it to be ironic, there's still this kind of backhanded cycle at play that sort of undoes even my most progressive ambitions, which is that it can still kind of fall back into familiar terrain. My heart and my art was filled with a fair amount of received violence, some of it real and some of it sort of exaggerated. The interesting thing for me in my work is how easy it is actually to commit atrocities. I mean, that's kind of what the work is about. If a girl like me can think of this stuff, then what? So I have an uneasy relationship with my own imagination. At the same time, I'd rather make the work than hold it all inside and get strange.